Hey guys, for today's video I will be lettering this quote, "Do not feel bad for doing what is best for you." Also, I just want to say, don't mind my nail polish, that chipped and I just did my nails, so yeah. So what I did was I went to the wrench, add, insert a photo, and I took a picture of the sketch that I did. So from here, I want to make sure I have a new layer above my quote. You could also swipe and lock it so you don't accidentally draw on top of that. And I'll be using a brush from my new brush pack. It's not that new now, but yeah. I'm going to be using Aya. It is one of the brushes that comes with the full pack. If you want to grab this, the link will be in the description down below. But I will be using Aya for this, and I also will be using one of my color palettes that I created. This is not available for purchase yet, but eventually it will be. So I'm just going to be using these colors for the design. So what I do is I figure out what size brush I want to work with, and I like the brush to be pretty thick, but I think that is slightly too thick. So I think that's probably a bit better. And I'll just start going over the letters here. And this brush is really good for beginners. It is really easy to work with. I would say this is one of the easiest brushes for a beginner, or of course if you're not a beginner, it's of course easy as well. And I just begin going over my sketch, and I know my sketch is a little bit crooked and everything, so first I like to get the letters out, and then at the end I start moving things around. So don't stress if your sketch isn't exactly perfect. I actually think I am going to add a copy of this sketch that I have here in a Dropbox file for you guys. If you are interested in trying this yourselves, you can actually grab that, download the photo, and then insert it into your Procreate and trace over it, and we'll see what you guys can come up with. So look down below in the description if you want to join along in lettering this, and if you do letter it, definitely tag me on Instagram and I will share it, and we'll see what kind of variations we get. I think that would be really fun. So I just go ahead and continue tracing each letter, and here and there I will kind of zoom out and take a look at how it's looking. And even if I don't love it at this point, that's okay, because at the end I will go back in and correct anything that I am not happy with. So I like to try to space out the the colors, so I want to make sure I don't have two yellows touching. So to avoid that, I'm gonna grab the green here, I hold down with one finger, and I push into my screen to grab a color. And see, now the green is separating the yellow a little bit more. The pinks are far apart, the reds are far apart, and the browns are pretty far apart. And then I will just say what color would work well here, which I'm gonna say is gonna be red, being that the red is all the way over there. So that is how I figure out my colors. I try to stagger them and make sure nothing is touching. And yeah, I used to do the whole counting, and it would be red, green, yellow, pink, red, green, yellow, pink, but I think it works a little bit better to just do it by eye and see how things are looking. So of course this is really not aligned, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and move things over. So my favorite way to move things over, I grab the selection tool up at the top, and I make sure I'm selected on freehand, and now I can actually draw a little bit of a circle or blob or whatever shape you want to call this around whatever I want to move, and then I grab the arrow, and now I can move everything over just like that. And another thing I want to point out here, you see how close the A and D are to each other, so see how much space is between all the other letters? You want to keep that consistent, so I'm going to actually move just that D over to the right a little bit and make sure it looks nicely spaced. So I'm going to move that just a smidge, and that looks so much better already. And again, I can always rearrange more at the end if I think I need to move things around, but sometimes I like that loose like imperfect look, so I might end up leaving it. And I also don't typically go in the right order of letters because it's not really necessary, being that I already wrote it out. I'm just kind of tracing now, so I kind of jump around. So from here, I'm going to grab a pink and do the R. Maybe a red over here for the D. Green. And I think I am going to actually fast forward through the rest of this because I think you guys get the idea now. And I don't want this to be as long as my last video was. If you watched that whole thing, it ended up being like over 25 minutes. So I'm going to finish this line, and then I am going to speed through the rest of the lettering for this section, and I will begin normal speed again once I get to you. Oh, but before I do that, I do want to move for doing over because as you can see, it is really not centered again. So that's why my sketches are just to give me a general idea of what I'm writing out, but I don't follow it too closely. And now the O needs to move over to the left as well. Just a smidge, like that. And I think that looks pretty good. I do have a bit of an issue in here, so I'm actually gonna swap the brown and the pink because now they were technically stacked on top of each other. And I might play around with this after, but I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the letters. Okay, so now I finished writing out the words, and you could tell this is not centered. Sorry, my dog is whining a little bit in the background, but from here I'm going to take this, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to take each line and put it on its own layer. So I'm going to go back to that selection tool. I'm going to select around the first line, so do not go to the arrow, and I'm going to use 3 fingers and swipe down, and I'm going to hit cut and paste, and I'm going to continue doing that for each line. That way from here I can actually center each line one at a time within the canvas. Okay, so now each line is on its own layer, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the arrow tool up at the top and click on snapping to make sure this is turned on. You want it to be blue, and what this will do is it'll show me when the word is lined up with the canvas, so you could see where it's yellow up there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for each layer and make sure everything is centered, and then after it is centered, I'm going to see if it looks visually centered. Sometimes even if it's actually centered, it might not look it from the eye. So like what is now centered, but to me it looks way too far to the right. So I'm actually going to move it a bit to the left and use my eye to do that. And then the last line, I'm going to do the same, like that. And I actually think what is has to move to the left a little bit more. You can actually tap to move very slowly if you don't want to move in big increments. So that looks a little bit better. The do not looks too far to the left, so I'm going to move it myself to the right just a little bit, and I'm going to look and see if everything looks about the same amount spaced. And now I want to move down what is and best for to make a little bit more space between those lines. They look a little bit too close together. So I'm going to go ahead and move those down just a little bit. And then again, just for best for. And that looks pretty good. We are getting a low battery. my iPad is always dying. If it's not plugged in, it is almost always on low battery. So that's a problem. But yeah, so I think that looks pretty good. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and do the last word, which is going to be you. So I'm going to make my canvas bigger because now this is not fitting. So up at the top, go to canvas, I hit crop and resize, and you can actually drag your canvas up on each of the sides to make it a little bit bigger rather than shrinking down your words. So I'm going to do that, finish cropping it, and from here I'm going to add a new layer up at the top. And what I'm going to do is take my Aya brush, I'm going to swipe on it, hit duplicate. This way, if I need to fix one of the letters later on, I will still have that brush size in here, but the new Aya that I duplicated, I'm going to make a lot bigger. I'm going to turn back on my sketch, which is in the back, and I'm actually going to move it down because it is now not lined up. So I'm going to do it like that, and maybe a little bit lower, and make sure I'm on that new layer and not drawing on my background, which I did before accidentally, and that is way too big, so I will adjust the brush until it is the size that I want it. I think a little bit bigger, and now I will just roughly trace over what I have here. Like that, and now I will go in and duplicate this one more time because I do want to make some stars with a small brush. So now I can do that, and maybe a red star on this side. And now I'm going to shut off the background and see how it's looking. Okay, I think that looks super cute. I just have to move you over a little bit. It looks a little bit off-centered. I'm actually going to turn it a tiny, tiny bit, rotate it, and I think that looks really good. So from here, I'm going to grab the canvas crop and resize section again. I'm going to move this down a little bit, and I'm going to hit done. I do have something on the screen that I had to erase. I'm going to add a background, so I'm going to grab the color that I have for the background. These, again, are not up for sale, but eventually I'm going to add some color palettes for you guys. I'm going to add a layer behind all the words, drag that in, and I want to add a little bit of texture, so I'm going to show you how I do that. So to add a texture to the design, I'm going to go ahead and hit a new layer, and I'm going to pick a brush here. I think I'm going to use my Kenzie 2.0 for this, and I'm going to grab a grayish color on a new layer, and I'm going to start drawing some little dots all around with a really small brush like this. And I'm just going to speckle all around the page, make some little tiny lines, some little, sometimes I'll make the brush really, really little and do like little lines like that here and there. So I will continue doing that, overlapping some of the letters and just little stippling all around the page. It's up to you how much or how little you want to do, but I know this looks kind of crazy right now. So what you want to do from there is click on your layer, hit the N, and you're going to get into your blending modes. So for this, I like to do linear burn or color burn, depending on what looks better. So I think linear burn looks pretty good, and I lower the opacity quite a bit until it's very, very slightly there. So you can just barely see some of the speckles, and you can also go ahead now and add some more if you want to. And that just gives it a nice little texture. Nothing too crazy, but yeah, I think it just looks really nice. So that is how I add my texture, and that is the full design. I actually am going to change the colors of the lettering, so I'm going to go ahead and pinch everything that I want on one layer, and I'm going to swipe to duplicate, shut off the background, and here's a fun little trick. I will pick a random color. I'm going to pick more of a pinky, more like a salmony pink, and I'm going to drag that into the pink color here and drag my hand to the right, and that's going to recolor everything. I'm going to pick another color because it didn't make that big of a difference, and I'm gonna drag this light blue into the green and see what that looks like. But that's a quick way I get some more color palettes, and then I will go ahead and hit duplicate, shut off the background again, and grab another color. Let's say this orange, and put it in the red and drag to the right and see what I get from there. You can also duplicate it and go up to your adjustments, hit hue saturation, click on layer if you have the new Procreate update, and you can adjust down at the bottom. So that's another fun thing to play around with. So that's how I get some new color palettes out of a design, and I hope you guys found this helpful. Comment below if you want to see more videos or if you have any suggestions, and please give this a like if you think it was helpful so I know what you guys want to see more of, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend.